So thank you for having me, first of all, and good morning to all of you. So Adrienne already said a little bit about myself. I'm Vera Rocha. I'm an associate professor at Copenhagen Business School. I have been in Denmark already for 7.5 years now. And what brought me to Denmark was actually the chance, the opportunity to join a group at CBS to do research on entrepreneurship, something that I'm very passionate about. I'm not an entrepreneur myself, but who knows, one day, because I'm getting more and more excited, and I'm supporting others in different ways. So who knows if one day I will join entrepreneurship for real, for like on the real side of it. But I have been doing a lot of research on entrepreneurship, including on female entrepreneurs. And now I'm venturing out into some new topics. As I said before, I'm more and more interested in broader inclusion in the labor market and doing research about refugees, people with criminal records. I got a large grant now from Carlsberg Foundation, and I will be starting a new project working on these topics. So a little bit distant from women, but still groups that need help to find ways to integrate themselves in the labor market, and entrepreneurship may be a route for them to become integrated, who knows. So for today, I organized my presentation around some good and bad news for you as women who want to become entrepreneurs. And before I go into details about the topic, what else can I say about me? Yeah, I already mentioned that I joined CBS end of 2014. I actually was very close to come to Aarhus in 2017. I was considering an offer from Aarhus University, and then at the end of the day, because of private reasons, I decided to stay in Copenhagen. But Aarhus is somehow close to my heart, and I have good connections to Aarhus and people working at Aarhus University doing research very related to what I do as well. I'm from Portugal originally. You may have already realized that I don't look very Nordic. I really like Copenhagen in general, and professionally it has been a huge opportunity for me, and I hope to stay many more years and be able to help many people who want to follow entrepreneurship for their careers. I teach entrepreneurship. I'm very passionate about teaching and research. In my everyday life, I teach mostly entrepreneurship at different levels: master, PhD level, and MBA. I do research about entrepreneurship and other topics, and I also like a lot of data analysis. So you will see that my research is very quantitative, so I tend to work with like population level data, and I used to have very good data in Portugal where we cover everybody in the labor market, and now I'm even luckier because I have the same in Denmark, and we can really cover everyone in Denmark and follow their trajectories, see what they do, in which firms they work, their success, their failures, and that's I think very powerful for research. I would like to hear a little bit about your perspective, because I have a lot of things to say, some good things, some bad things, in terms of how encouraging they may be for you right now. But I also think that informing you about them can be very powerful, because if you understand the biases that exist and the barriers that you may encounter in a month or in a year or two, you are prepared for those, and you can already think about actions that can help you go around and turn them into your advantage. But maybe you have already faced some of those barriers yourself as a woman trying to become an entrepreneur. So if I would have just 2 or 3 volunteers, if you have encountered something, how do you feel about becoming an entrepreneur, and have you faced any of those obstacles already? Maybe not, and that's great, but if you have, or maybe you perceive that you may face some of those, I would just like to hear, to set the stage, if anyone has any experience by being a woman in entrepreneurship. Yes?
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily about being a woman, but I feel like one obstacle is largely internal, and thinking of like, oh, how feasible is this actually? How many, not only just like, oh, is the idea good enough and so on, but like, oh, can I handle all of these things, and figuring out how to make a business and finding people and etc. So I feel like one obstacle, and I don't know if it's female or woman related, but that it's an internal kind of barriers that you also have to overcome, like for yourself, push yourself to actually do, like, start a venture.
Yeah. So one of you, I don't know if it was you, no, I think someone else studies psychology. Yeah. And I don't know if in psychology you have evidence. I think that you have that evidence that men and women may be different in their self-confidence, entrepreneurial self-efficacy. There are studies that show that. So this could be one barrier that, prevents women to sometimes even take the first step and start out and start up a venture, right? So that can be one of the barriers that women face much more than men. Anything else that you have maybe encountered over there?
It's mostly how people receive your idea.
Mm-hmm.
When you get an idea, you're very excited, you really want to try it out, and then you tell people that you're close with, hey, this is my idea, and then usually the first thing that comes, why risk it?
Yeah.
Why are you trying that? It's not going to work out. People are already in there. It's already too much. Take the safe route. And that also what brings the internal conflict.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if they who are close to me think that, then maybe it's actually true.
And you think that some of these reactions may have to do with you being a woman?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think when you're a guy, it's more easier. With that, go for it. Just try it out. But then for girls, usually there's a safer route for you.
Yeah.
Or that's.
And you, which type of people? Is it even friends, or you like more serious people that could be involved in the startup world that could give you feedback on your idea?
It's usually family and then friends.
Okay, so it starts very close,
Very
right?
close,
Yeah. Even in your close network, you may face these, stereotypes maybe that you are not made for this. Yeah.
Especially when you don't have connection with people who is in the entrepreneurship side. In the page. Or so usually just go with your family and friends, and that's where you usually hear it.
Yeah. That's really helpful to hear. So there are some internal barriers, but also some external barriers, and this tends to, accumulate and grow as you go. Anyone else would like to share? Maybe one last over there.
It's not something I've experienced personally, but I've heard in an entrepreneurial Facebook group for women that some women face problems getting loans from banks when they come just as them.
Yeah.
But one woman then, after letdown from her bank, she took her husband with her, who has nothing to do with her business, and then she could get a loan because they just spoke to him.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's very aligned with something I have to say later on. Yeah. Very good to hear. Yeah. And one last.
It's not, I don't have experience in entrepreneurship, but it's more fear I have being a woman in this world, and it's related to what we said previously. It's like I have the impression that the way I'm communicating about my project is from my heart. I have emotion related, I have values, and I want to sell this way my project. But I have the impression that when I'm going to be with investors, finance world, it's going to be more facts and numbers, and I feel that it will not be so easy for me. I think I can do it the main way, but I would like to be able to do it my way.
Also very good input. So communication is definitely important, and this goes back to your previous point that when you try to raise funds and you pitch your idea, the way you pitch it will certainly have an influence in how much money you will get and if you will get money at all. So as I said in the beginning, it's good that we are meeting today, and that it's good that we are talking about all these at such an early stage, because the more information you have up front, the more you can expect regarding these obstacles, and the more you can act before you even face them. Because sometimes you go your way and you will face them, and then it just makes you more discouraged and you may give up too early. If you know that these obstacles are out there and you will face them with even your friends and family, with your customers, with your financial resource providers, with your employees, I have something to show you at the end, then you can act before, ex ante, and minimize these obstacles. It will be still difficult, but hopefully less than if you would go for it without this information. So because of all this, and we all agree that indeed women face something different. They face different barriers than men. And that's also why, in part, there are fewer women than men in entrepreneurship. And that is also why we see so many initiatives in Denmark, but in all over the world, trying to encourage more women. And initiatives like this weekend, that we target women, we bring them together, and we try to prepare them for what is out there when it comes to become an entrepreneur. So these are just some examples of what I have found in Denmark for different target groups. We see, for instance, some initiatives are targeted at mothers, maybe because mothers have struggles that are different than non-mothers, and they can also become entrepreneurs, but they may face different obstacles, they may need different help. This is an initiative at CBS that was launched maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Again, CBS also has an incubator, the Copenhagen School of Entrepreneurship, and we also have, I don't know how similar their initiatives are to the Kitchen's initiatives, but they created a program as well targeted at female students. It's called the RISE program, and this speaks very much to the things I have just said, that we need sometimes to tailor these workshops, these programs, this training to women because they face different obstacles than men.
We've been working very close with the RISE project also. Yeah.
Fantastic, great to hear. Yes, and also women in tech, because as maybe some of you have realized already, because you are in a more tech-oriented world, I don't know if that's the case, women are even less represented there because of all these biases, but also because of things that start much, much earlier, when you are a kid and when you are a student, and you are not exposed to the same opportunities as boys. So your opportunities to contribute to tech and to study in STEM fields start, they are different, and this starts much earlier, even with our own biases and the way we raise daughters versus sons, right? So despite all these great initiatives, and these initiatives have been, many of them, out there for years, we still have a large gap. And Adriana mentioned before 25%. Now in the Kitchen is 30%, and these numbers resemble very much what I have seen in the Danish data. Sometimes a little bit of an improvement over time, but not much. So it's still like tops 30%, but again, it depends how we define entrepreneurship, at which fields we look at. If we look at tech, it's not so encouraging.
Yeah, and if I could just say that I think if we were to look at how many female founders here at the Kitchen got funding, I think it would be very few from the 30% that actually got funding to their project.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a way to look at it.
Yeah. And depending also on the type of funding we look at. So before you mentioned loans, banks. If we look at venture capitalists, it's even worse. And I have something to tell you and to show you later. So the share is like 1-2% of all entrepreneurs, that 1-2% of women who raise VC funds. And there are reasons for that. And again, it's good that we know that upfront. And maybe we can tailor our strategies when we pitch to VCs. So this increases our chances a little bit more. So definitely there is a problem. We see that this is written down in policy reports, in initiatives like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So one of them is gender equality. We want to get better by 2030, but let's see what we need to do until we get there. And this is pretty much the same all over the world. Also in Denmark, though there is a lot of variation there, and I will show you in a second. So this is just some statistics comparing, already 10 years ago it was 28%. In 2017, 25% of women were entrepreneurs. So actually the trend was going down. It has been fluctuating a little bit, but still I think at most is at 30, according to the Danish data. And here we see, if I can move a little bit, here is a comparison between Denmark and other countries in OECD. And these, I don't know if you can read, but it's the percentage of women in the age range 18 to 64 that become entrepreneurs. And this is quite recent, it's 2019 to 2020. So in every 100 women, how many become entrepreneurs? And in Denmark, it's around 4. That's pretty low. And the average in OECD is 9. So the average percentage of entrepreneurs in the labor market, if we look at everyone, if we take a snapshot of the labor market, it tends to be 10, 11%, but it tends, of course, to be lower for women. And in OECD, the average is 9 in every 100, and in Denmark is 4. So there must be something in Denmark that really, discourages women, or And I have some facts to show. Of course.
I don't see. What is the top one? The long.
Chile.
Chile?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of women entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
In Chile.
32. Yeah. It may also be a different type of entrepreneurship. It could be necessity entrepreneurship, right? Like these small businesses that you sell just something out of your house. There are also programs that are targeted at certain communities. But this already shows that, entrepreneurship can be done in different ways, right? We don't have probably a standard definition of what entrepreneurship is here. It's mostly you run a business, right? But it can be a very knowledge-intensive business or a very necessity-driven business. If you just bake something out of your kitchen and you sell it and you are a business woman. So that can be more of the kind in Chile, but not all of it. Yes, so this is all to show that there is a lot of work to do in Denmark. Why? Maybe you have already some perceptions of why we have so few women in Denmark, in general, but even more in Denmark, in entrepreneurship. Anyone would like to give some ideas of why this difference is so large and so persistent? So if we look 10 years, 20 years, 30 years back, it's there. It's not recent that something happened that recently. Over there.
I don't have, but I just want to make a comment. I'm extremely surprised about it because I come from France, and in France, I think the patriarchal culture is more present. So I thought that Denmark would be a women's paradise, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not. And
Yeah.
I was really surprised.
Yeah, me too. I always thought that Denmark is so equal and we should observe more women in entrepreneurship. And compared to Portugal, Portugal is pretty much better. Where, it's the opposite. We have so much imbalance in other areas.
I think that being an entrepreneur is also viewed as something that might lead to you working many, many hours a week. And that might be hard to get into the picture that you could have of wanting to have a family or wanting to have, those more, those values are also maybe more might be more seen in women than men.
Yeah, and I think that very much relates to what you perceive as entrepreneurship. If it is something that should be disruptive, very radical and scalable, that takes a lot of your time, that you have to work day and night, then of course it's not compatible with having a family. But actually there is a stream of research that shows that many women choose entrepreneurship precisely to balance their work-life struggles. But then sometimes they tend to become entrepreneurs of a certain kind, of those firms that are less scalable and maybe less demanding, or that they take their time, right? They are not the type of working day and night because of those family challenges that they need to take care of as well. Over there?
I'm wondering if the fact that Denmark is the Danish welfare system, that women are largely employed in welfare, kindergartens, schools, the health system. That maybe that has to do something.
Exactly. Could be a comfort.
The other Nordic countries are the numbers there?
Yeah. So Norway is actually very close to Denmark, 5, just a little higher. Sweden 5.8. Am I missing anything?
That should be Finland if it's up
Yeah.
there, but
I don't see Finland. Do you?
see it.
Yeah. For some reason, but they don't seem so far from at least Sweden and Norway. They are very similar. And again, could be partly related to that. Also, research shows that many entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because they lost their job, right? So, and they don't have an option, or they have very unstable labor market situation, so they actually choose entrepreneurship to try to get to that stability, even though it's risky. Because Denmark protects people much more, maybe there is not this push so much, right? So there is a more comfortable situation in the labor market that you don't need to think about setting up your own thing, because somehow you will always have a plan B, and you will be covered. Yeah, one last and then we move on. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking that it might also be connected to the fear of failing.
Yeah.
I think it feels like it's worse failing with your business as a woman,
Yeah.
maybe, than
Yeah.
if you're a man, then it's just like try again another time.
Exactly, yeah. That's a good point as well. So that goes back to the internal factors, that you may be less confident, but also more afraid of what if I fail, and also how the market and how the outsiders will perceive if you fail. Maybe actually you prove to the market that you are not capable of doing this, right? And you show that you are not legitimate as an entrepreneur if you fail. While men, I mean, failure is a very likely outcome when you become an entrepreneur, but how you perceive failure from the outside is very different depending on who the founder is, right? So if we have this kind of pressure that we need to excel to make ourselves legitimate, then the fear of failure may be an obstacle that stops us too early. Okay, we have collected a lot of input already, and some of the reasons I will mention now actually match with some of the things we have talked about. So we are still trying to understand why is this difference, this gap, so wide and so persistent. So one of the reasons is, of course, the way men and women are allocated in positions in the labor market, and we see already that men and women tend to reach CEO roles, management roles at different rates, with women being less often represented in those top management roles. And why would that be important? Well, in a way, if you become a manager, you also acquire skills that are important if you become a startup founder, because you have to manage the whole process of developing a product or a service, taking it to the market, being credible to the outside, managing people. So you would, of course, acquire some of those skills if you get to those management roles before. And that's very rare, or relatively rare, for women. So here again, this is Danish data, 2010, 2017. We see women, much fewer women in leadership roles than men, and this gap continues over time. So even though there is a little improvement, it's not enough to catch up. So this is still a large gap there. So this could be one reason. There are many reasons, of course, and all these kind of reinforce each other. Then, as I don't remember your name, Agatha? No. Yeah, when you mentioned the internal, Marie. Yeah. The internal differences that we call it in research differences in disposition, in preferences. They start much earlier, sometimes when we are kids, and the way we are exposed to certain situations, the way our parents rise ourselves, right? So we see from studies, some of them psychology studies, that women tend to shy away from competition, and they don't feel so comfortable in, as you said before, losing. So they are afraid to lose, so they don't engage in competing so much, while men tend to embrace it. They are more risk takers. They are more overconfident as well. So of course, these differences are kind of imprinted in our personality, if we wish, and this tends to stick to our life and shape our decisions when we apply for jobs and when we choose when to change our career. Then again, related could be differences in overconfidence and risk-taking, with men tending to score higher, according to a few studies. And this seems to be true already at early stage, if you do these studies with teenagers. And these are experiments, so they they do it very accurately, and they can measure these differences, these behavioral differences, already in early stages. And it doesn't seem to be specific to a certain country. So we have this evidence both in Sweden and in Colombia. So you see very different countries, and still in both countries. And if we look at literature that looks at different contexts, we see kind of a systematic trend that girls tend to be less confident, less risk-taking than boys. And this kind of gets imprinted in your choices. As you said before, women and men may respond differently to feedback and rejections. Also, the way so if you incorporate your feedback and try to understand, okay, I failed, why? And there are studies that show that if men fail, they many times attribute failure to bad luck, or the market was not ready for me. It's the outside, that it's their fault, not my fault. While women tend to more often perceive rejections and failure as their own fault. So they attribute failure to themselves, to their lack of ability, and this sometimes is just based on their biases, their lack of confidence, their lower risk-taking preferences. So this kind of needs to, that's why we need information, and we need to be aware of our own biases. Because of our lower confidence, lower self-efficacy, we tend to, if we fail, it's my fault. It's not because it's the market, right? It could be there is a crisis out there and it was just bad timing. And if I try again in a better timing, maybe it will work out. It's not necessarily my fault. So trying to understand the role of ability and luck seems to be very different for men and women. So all these seem or sound bad news. So that's why I framed this today as good and bad news. But the good news is that the context and the way we nurture each other can be very powerful and change this. So if we look at the environment, and again, things like this, that we get together and we try to shape and change these behavioral traits, the culture, the way of upbringing people can change these trends. So there are studies, for instance, of exposure to same-sex schooling. I think there were some studies that show that if kids are exposed to same-sex schooling because of certain rules in their country, they tend to be more similar, girls and boys, than if they study together. So this exposure and this, so because kids are, how do you say, brought? How do you say? Yeah, now I'm missing the word. Brought up, yeah, in different ways, and we kind of imprint those biases already, and then they meet at school and all this kind of piles up and spirals up. If we would do experiments, this is of course very extreme, where we don't necessarily expose them to these different sides, they would kind of develop in a more equal way. So this is very extreme, of course, but this is based on some experiments that show that if you are exposed to certain contexts in early stages of your life, you may develop in a different way. And then other things that can be done is, and Adriana mentioned before, role models. And role models can be found in so many circumstances, and they can also be used in different stages of our life. And there is, for instance, research that shows exposure to female teachers in domains that tend to be very male-dominated, could be sciences, could be math, has a very strong effect on girls' decision to pursue those fields later on, and also their performance. And the same, as I will show you later, can be done in entrepreneurship and in other career settings and choices. Okay, more reasons why this difference is so persistent and so pronounced. Stereotypes, social norms, some of you mentioned these already. So as you mentioned before, when you talk to your friends and family, and they tend to say, well, you are not made for this, or they already, because they have these stereotypes, these gender-specific role expectations, and this example, and this goes back to your evidence of the loans, right? When a female tried to raise funds from banks, and they get rejected multiple times until they bring their husband. This is a study, and again, this is another example why information is so important up front. This is a very, I find it fascinating study. You know these pitches when entrepreneurs pitch their ideas to venture capitalists. We have these shows, Shark Tank, and all sorts of variants in different countries. They did, they recorded all the videos of all these interactions. And what they found is that when women present their ideas to venture capitalists, they get very different questions than men. And the fact that you get different questions, of course, asks for different answers. And what is the main difference? So if you are the very same idea or very similar comparable idea and you have a woman pitching it versus a man, venture capitalists will tend to ask for safety questions, safety related questions to women to try to prove that your business is stable, have you proven your concept? And you have here some examples of, they call it prevention type of questions. They will ask you, for instance, how long will it take you to break even? So just focus on stability and the basic proof of your idea. How predictable are your future cash flows? While if you are a man, you will be taken for granted that your idea is stable, and they will ask you questions that are more promotion. They are oriented towards scalability. So you will be given the opportunity to show that you can scale up and that you can grow this a lot. While for women, you don't get to answer these questions because they are not asked in the first place. You are asked questions that are just basic questions related to the stability of your business. So what they show, and there is a follow-up experiment, what you can do is that as a woman, you can detect the type of question and you can foresee that you will get prevention type of questions. You will answer in a promotive way. You will provide promotion type of answers. So if you are asked about your break-even, you can answer that, but give more information about how you tend to scale up this. And if you do that, so they showed that for those that were trained in this way, they could actually raise more money, get higher chances of raising money and raising more money. So this may be a way of, again, anticipating that you will face these biases, and these will, of course, can be with venture capitalists, can be with banks, can be with whoever will invest in your firm as an investor, but also could be also your employees in the future. And I have something to show you regarding the employees later. This is, I think, the last piece of reasons why this gap is so persistent. Again, this is some data comparing Denmark with other countries. This is a measure of how we individuals perceive how easy it is to start up a venture. So the higher this measure, the easier it is to start up a venture. And this, of course, has to do with the support you get from the government, biases that are in the culture, and so on and so forth. So if we compare Denmark to many other countries, we see that they are not so bad. So on average, people perceive it's not so difficult to start up a business as in Greece or Hungary, for instance. But these two extremes are the differences between men and women. And surprisingly, again, if you look at the distance between these two, Denmark is the country where the difference is higher, with women under. So again, women perceive it as much more difficult to start up a business compared to men. Or men perceive it as much higher, much easier to start a business than women. So there is something, again, in our perceptions, but also on the way women are treated when they try to start up a venture, based on the biases that they find, based on the way they are treated by investors, mentors, maybe employees, and so on. So some good news. Let's try to boost a little bit the spirits and say, okay, what can we do about it? And that's where female role models can help and enter. And this is based on some of my research, but as always, when you do research, you build on many others who have done research on this. So you are not the first one proposing this. We are just showing that role models can be powerful for certain groups of women, and they can be found in certain contexts that were not studied before. So we propose that role models can be found also at work, and when you work, for instance, at a startup. Prior research has shown that role models can be found in your family. So if you have parents who are entrepreneurs, you tend to become an entrepreneur yourself because to a certain extent your parents will be role models for you. But this will be even stronger among same gender parents. So for girls and their mothers. And there are not so many mothers who are entrepreneurs and who manage to also have a family and who happen to have girls. Right? So there is not so much that we can leverage in the society that would solve the problem by itself, right? But it can be one starting point. But of course, you also learn different things, right? From a mother who is an entrepreneur, than if you work for a female entrepreneur yourself when you grow up, right? You can get the inspiration and change your preferences from early on, but you can also kind of get more exposed to the challenges of becoming an entrepreneur as a woman if you work every day with one. So I'm sure that I don't need to convince you that this can be powerful, because role models can inspire you, can mentor you, can provide you contacts, give you lessons of all sorts. And what we propose is that this role modeling will be stronger within same gender pairs. So if we as women use female role models compared to if we would use male role models, and this effect, so the change in our preferences, in our goals will be much higher among women than among men, just because men are already here, right? So their exposure to role models may change a little bit. But for women, we are kind of here, so our exposure to role models can make a big difference. And maybe I don't spend a lot of time trying to explain the rationale behind this. I'm happy to, there is a short video that I can share later on where we summarize these in 2 minutes. It's an animated video where we show all the rationale behind. But so the main theoretical argument in this study is that the context where you are at can change a lot your preferences and your abilities as well. So you, by being exposed in the kitchen, for instance, and being part of this program, compared to the same you not taking part of this, you will hopefully see a different outcome. And if you do more of this, so all this to say that the same you put in different contexts can make a difference, right? And the context we are proposing that is so important is workplace relationships. And here we look at real jobs, but it can start in your everyday life as a student and also as take these as part of as your everyday professional relationships. And by being exposed to female entrepreneurs, what can you have? You can have entrepreneurial career previews. So it's like watching a movie, right? When you go to the cinema, you have to experience the full movie by yourself. But you can also watch the trailer, right? So being exposed to these female role models can give you many of those trailers in which you can have a career preview of what entrepreneurship can be. It is also a way for you to socialize with this career, because you will realize you need to do different things than if you work for someone else. And you may also get to know which challenges others have faced and how they have overcome those. What we propose is that gender will matter a lot here, because if you are exposed to a role model who is of opposite gender than yourself, it may of course have an effect because you still learn. But for this role modeling to happen, and I think some of you were talking, maybe the psychology, we need to identify with each other. You were mentioning the students that are older versus the younger ones. They don't have so much in common, right? So for you to have a role model and to learn from someone, the first stage is that you need to identify with this person. You need to kind of feel that you connect somehow. And that's when gender kicks in. Because if you do that with someone that is more similar to yourself, you will be more attentive to whatever this person has to share. And this is based on research that transmission of knowledge, values, beliefs is much more effective between people that are similar to each other. So our very first prediction is that if you are exposed to a role model of the same gender as yourself, the effect of you becoming an entrepreneur will be stronger than if you are exposed to someone of opposite gender. And then, these of course, so gender matters in the first place, but then you have how does it work for men and women? We propose that this will be especially important for women because, and it could be because of two main effects. It could be the demand side, so all of you are on the demand side. You demand role modeling. You need this social influence. And you have, as I said before, we are here in our preferences, in our confidence, so there is much larger room to make a change compared to men. But it can also be a supply side explanation. So we have Adriana here. She is an experienced entrepreneur. She's now trying to help other women because she's aware of the biases and the barriers that you will face. So you may feel more like an activist than men feel, maybe. So you also have this trigger that you want to offer more and you pull off these initiatives. So you want to give back. So it can be both sides. We cannot really tease out which side is driving this. But what we propose is that this effect, so being exposed to a role model of the same gender as yourself, will be more powerful if you are a woman, more powerful if you are a woman compared to if you were a man. So we test this. I will skip the details. As I said in the beginning, I like data a lot, and I do research with lots of data. And I did this study in Denmark with this population level data that we have from Statistics Denmark. So I look at startups with founders and personnel, so they hire people. 40,000 startups founded between 2003 and 2007. Again, we see the percentage of women here in my sample was 29% of female founders, so still a disadvantage. And we have nearly 90,000 employees that have been hired by these firms. Then we track these employees over time and we see where do they go afterwards. Do they become entrepreneurs or do they do something else? And we find around 2,000 of them become entrepreneurs and 30%, again, very similar, were women. So this goes back to the statistics that Adriana was mentioning before. If we look at just the raw numbers, right? No sophisticated analysis. These are employees working for female entrepreneurs, employees working for male entrepreneurs. We know already that men become entrepreneurs more often, right? That stays true. So this is the blue bar. Men are more likely to, after being an employee in this startup, they become entrepreneurs themselves. This is the share of women who do so. And the surprising factor for us was, well, there are more women becoming entrepreneurs after they have worked for a female entrepreneur in a startup firm. And if we look at the difference, so this is the gender gap, it's nearly half. So of course, it's a very restricted setting, but maybe there is something going on in startups that makes a difference if you work for a female entrepreneur versus a male entrepreneur. Could this be a good story or a bad story? We started with a good story, right? We wanted to believe this is a good story due to role modeling, that female entrepreneurs are doing something good for you by being role models. It could be a negative story, and I will tell you later how we tested for that. But okay, so if this is a good story, what can we do to understand? Let me just give you a few more numbers before. Yeah, just for you to see that this is actually a large effect. So we have compared these. So a female employee, let's say any of you working in a startup firm, with a female entrepreneur and comparing yourself working for a male entrepreneur. Your probability to next, after you leave the firm, to become an entrepreneur will be between 30 to 90% higher than if you would have worked for a man. And here we have two different effects because it depends on how we measure entrepreneurship. So we try to look at those that become self-employed. So I may set up my business on the side, or like is my new career stage, my new career role. I am self-employed and I don't hire anybody. So that's the 30%. I think it's even more promising that we see that you are even more likely to start up a venture and hire someone already from the outset. And these have been perceived as more solid startups because if you set up a venture and you hire someone already, it's in principle, more growth oriented than if you just do it alone as a self-employed. The effect is still there, but the good news is that we see an even stronger effect. So you may also acquire the confidence of setting up something and hire someone already from the outset. We have compared this effect with other role modeling sources that you could get, like from your moms. And we found that this effect is even stronger than having a mother in entrepreneurship. So that's encouraging. The effect is still there, a little bit weak, but that may be because there are so few mothers, entrepreneurs with daughters, right? So it could be a small numbers reason why we see a weaker effect. And then for men, nothing. We don't see a difference. They become entrepreneurs no matter the gender of their boss before. If anything, they are more likely to become entrepreneurs if they have fathers with entrepreneurial experience and if they have male peers in the team that are entrepreneurs, but nothing related to the boss, right? So we don't see the same effect there. So we conclude this may be evidence of role modeling that is stronger for women. So, as I said, we want to believe this is a positive story. So we went multiple ways, slicing the data, trying to understand if this is role modeling, we should observe a number of things. And if these things are true, then it may be a role modeling effect. So the first thing we thought, okay, no, it's not true that anyone can be a role model for you. They have to perform well, right? For you to perceive someone as a role model, it should be someone that is performing above average. They are going the extra mile. And you see that, so they stand out. They are a good example. So if that is the case, we should observe this effect being stronger coming from female entrepreneurs that perform better than the average in the industry. That's exactly what we find. So if we compare women who perform above average and women who perform below average, the effect is stronger coming from you working for a female entrepreneur that has performed above average. So these, of course, as I think one of you were saying, these may give legitimacy to women as entrepreneurs. Another way of you standing out and becoming a role model is if you do so in a male-dominated environment. So in an industry, let's say maybe tech fields, if you are, of course, a hairdresser, there are more, maybe not so much in Denmark actually, but if we look in Portugal, all hairdressers are women, right? But in Denmark it's maybe different. But if you, of course, you can see industries where it's more common to have female entrepreneurs than men, and the other way around. So the effect is stronger if you stand out by being a successful entrepreneur in a male-dominated environment. So this makes you more of a minority, and it makes you stand out in a positive way. Other things. So I mentioned before, for you to perceive someone as a role model, you have to somehow, there is a barrier first of social identification. Again, going back to your point of older students, there is this barrier, they don't have so much in common. So you have to have something in common. It could be age that makes you closer socially, and if this is if this step is taken, then role modeling will be more likely to happen because you have identified with each other already. So that's exactly what we find. This effect between women employees and women entrepreneurs reinforcing each other is stronger when they are similar in age rank, in education background. So maybe both of them have studied biology. So there is a similarity that makes them speak the same language. Both of them are mothers, or none of them are mothers. So some similarity in family structure. So if both of us have kids, we kind of have something to talk about and we kind of connect. And then maybe we see each other more as similar, and I will be more attentive to you as a role model than if we have this degree of separation. And birthplace. So we looked at a number of things that could make people more connected, and we find this to be the case. So social identification is there, role modeling is more likely. And then the last piece is for whom would this influence be more important? I will go to you in a second. And we thought, okay, women who have no experience in entrepreneurship, those that have never been working in startup firms, and women who have, we don't have mothers in entrepreneurship, so they don't have this role model in the family. And that's exactly what we find. So the effect is stronger for these groups of women who may lack role models otherwise. So all these pieces together seem to point to there is a positive influence because it's stronger when you connect to each other more, and it's stronger for those that need it more. We also find that you need some minimum exposure. So you need to stay with this female entrepreneur at least 2 years for this effect to kick in. So this is also consistent to a role modeling effect in the sense that if there is something to learn, you need a more continued exposure to this person. You had a question.
Yeah, that's just a reflection. I'm rather provoked or rather troubled with the pictures I often see of female entrepreneurs. When you see pictures from that organization, Female Founders, it's always young women, long hair, curly, they're pretty, they're skinny, they're awesome, they're just beautiful.
Yeah,
and
nobody will identify with them. Is that what you mean?
I'm not going to identify. They're too young for me, they're too pretty for me, they're too skinny for me, they're too perfect for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not identifying. And if you go back just 2 slides, I think.
Here.
Well, those on the other side, they were pretty too. They had long hair, they had tiny waists. And stuff like that. And here, that guy over there, or those 7 guys, they're actually not very marked. They're just men. I think she's very marked. She's sexy, she's posing, short breasts, long hair, tiny waist, small shoulders, and also those on the stages over there.
Yeah, but the point I wanted to make here is that the effect would be stronger when you stand out in a man's world, right? Not because you are skinny or beautiful, it's more because you break the stereotype that you can, that you are not a man and you are still successful. So you will be noticed more.
Yeah,
and
I get that one, but still, I think that actually, I think when female founders, I'm not engaged in that. I'm inspired, but also I'm troubled with the way they are illustrating the female entrepreneur, because I think they are not representing.
The representative. I understand what you mean, and I think I agree because as we show here, for this effect to be there, you kind of need to identify with these people, right? You need to see yourself in their shoes. And you need to think like, if they have done it, I can also do it. And if they are perceived as they are too distant, then this effect doesn't even start. And that's why, I mean, just publicizing women entrepreneurs in magazines and making them so perfect will probably not be effective, right? Because nobody, like many of us, don't see ourselves as I'm just too far. It's like it's putting a man there, but now you put just a perfect woman and I'm still too far. So you need to make it maybe more realistic first. And I don't think that publicizing it in magazines is enough, because you lack this connection, right? So if there is anything about changing beliefs and learning something, you need this exposure, and settings like this are a great start, right? It's not really like startups. You are not developing a startup, but maybe you will now build a network and you may work with each other. Like you were saying that you have a group that now meets with each other every week, and you kind of maybe have each other as role models somehow. If one of you goes ahead and makes some progress, it can inspire the others, and you have built this social identification and this proximity that you need in the first place to somehow nurture and inspire each other. Okay.
Time is running.
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah.
But
should I close?
I think we need to wrap up, because I think we need to do the break. But the key takeaways.
Yeah, I just wanted. It's like just a piece of information. It's if I have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, okay, the good news is that role models can be powerful. It can help you take the step, become an entrepreneur. But don't forget that you will face other barriers once you enter. And the VC's interaction, the loans, so all the interaction with your resource providers will be another stage in which you have to somehow counteract. And this is another study I'm working on, and where we find that you will face probably barriers with your employees. Because surprisingly, employees work less for female bosses. And we do this in startups, and we find that there is a large employee labor imbalance with women being penalized as entrepreneurs. So we, as you said, so I don't think that, you were saying before that working in a startup means working long hours. Of course, you need your employees to do the same. Right? So you need, as an entrepreneur, to find employees that are willing to go the extra mile. What we find is that for female entrepreneurs, for women entrepreneurs, employees will be much less likely to do this extra mile, because they will anticipate. So there is this stereotype that women are much more balanced in their work-life context, right? They sometimes even choose entrepreneurship to find this balance. And according to research, women tend to prioritize work less than men. So as an employee, as your future employees, they will have the expectation that you will be less demanding to work for than if you were a man. And if you ask them to work extra time, you will violate their expectations, and they will be less likely to respect your, to comply with your requests. That's exactly what we find. We do 2 studies, again, with large-scale data, with 58,000 startups, more than 200,000 employees. We find, when we look at extra hours, employees work about 7% fewer extra hours if their boss in the startup is a woman or a team of women. And then we do an experiment online with more than 1,000 respondents, where we put a fictitious startup and we sign these requests as women versus men. And then we ask them to do some extra tasks, very simple tasks, but for no pay. Like they have a task, and then we say, we are a very constrained startup, and it would be great if you could do a little extra work for us, but we cannot pay you more. Are you willing to do that? And what we find is that, so this is actually a control group where we don't provide the names. With the good thing is that knowing who the founder is makes people more willing to work. But if you focus on these 2 bars, these are men and these are women. And again, so these employees that are asked to work extra, they are less likely to do so if you are a female founder. And if they accept the request and they do a little bit of extra work, they will still complete fewer tasks. They will stop earlier if you are a female entrepreneur. And of course, we do a lot of checks again. Why this may be the case? The reason seems to be because you violate their expectations of work demand. They will find your request as unfair or more difficult, the expectations from your employees. How can you adjust these expectations and maybe counteract these upfront? I think I should stop here, right? I'm sorry for being too long, but
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think we should.
Thank you. My email, if ever you want to reach out, so feel free. I'm also happy to circulate the studies if you ever want to read.
Yeah, and we just want to give you a little present here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
for coming to Aarhus.
Thanks.
And also, you're of course going to get a
nice
bag here, which all of the participants also got.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. And
thank you.
I really hope that this talk gave you a lot of inspiration and motivation to move on with your startup, and also to know what kind of influence you could have on potential female employees in the future in your startup. And I don't know, Vera, if you have time to just hang around a bit in the break, because then if people have questions, they can come up to you just for the next 15 minutes
Of course,
or so.
yes, I'm happy to.
Then I think we all need a break now, and see you upstairs. And I just need to see what time it is. Okay, let's say 20 past then, because we moved a bit over time. We went a bit over time. So 20 past 11, we'll meet upstairs in the conference room, so you will have time to go to the toilet and stuff. And please bring your plates and your glasses with you. Is there anything else I need to say?
Bring your glass upstairs if you want to have coffee, and the plates you can just take upstairs in the kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll show you.
Yes. And we'll also have time to put a piece on the puzzle.
Again, the picture, because I was too far and
yeah.
and